Welcome to the December 1st, 2022 Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. I've got 6:01. Let's start with a roll call vote. Haven't done this in the past, so if I call your name, if you can just say present. So William Skills.
Present.
Jeff Fleschauer.
Present.
Greg Caesar.
Present.
Joel Tomlin.
Present.
And Jonathan Langley present. So got a full house tonight. Let's start with the minutes from the November 3rd, 2022 meeting. You guys need a minute or so to review those. If not, I'm ready to entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the minutes. Second.
Motion for approval made by Joel, second by William. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, minutes are approved. Staff announcements?
Yes, I have several. As you can see, our screens are not working again. I apologize for that. Apparently, they went on the fritz just this morning, so hopefully we can get that solved for our January meetings and all moving forward, but apologize for that. Second announcement I have is that the Surface Pros, you saw my email about those. We're going to pass those out, if possible, on Monday, December 19th. We have a time slot from 2:45 to 4. You can just drop in if you want to give us a heads up when you can come. That'd be great. But it's really just a matter of getting you to sit with our IT department, learn your login name, test it out, and just know that they're working so that you'll be ready for January. And then my last announcement is to announce that this is Joel's last meeting. Joel has served on the BZA since 2013. And he's rolling off to allow a new citizen to serve the community. Joel, we thank you for your insight and wisdom that you've given to the BZA, and we wish you the best. And
Thank
we
you
have
so
a
much.
small gift for you.
Appreciate that.
10 years, nice run. That's right. Yeah, thank you all very much. You'll do just fine without me.
Appreciate your service, Joel. It's been an honor serving with you, so appreciate your time and efforts too.
Thank you very much.
More announcements? Okay. All right, so we'll move on to the actual kind of agenda items. Item number 2, it's going to be, make sure I didn't skip anything here. Yep, so we're good. All right, item 2, it's an appeal of an administrative decision regarding an interpretation of the floodway fringe overlay district boundaries based on a Federal Emergency Management Agency letter of map revision based on fill for the property located at Water's Edge PUD subdivision section 7. Staff?
Thank you and good evening. The applicant is requesting an appeal of administrative decision to interpret the city's FFO boundaries for section 7 of the Water's Edge PUD subdivision. The request is based on the letter of map revision based on fill document issued by FEMA on November 2nd, 2022. The zoning ordinance states that the FFO boundaries shall coincide with the boundaries of the 100-year floodplain, excluding floodways, as adopted in section 17.6, floodplain protection. This request is for the BZA to interpret the FFO boundary based on the FEMA-approved floodplain boundary change as identified in the letter of map revision based on fill. Staff recommends a motion to approve the applicant's request to interpret the FFO boundary on the City of Franklin zoning map based on a letter of map revision based on fill issued by FEMA on November 2nd, 2022 for Section 7 of the Water's Edge PUD subdivision. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you, staff. Is the applicant present for this item? You can step forward for us and state your name for the record.
Good evening, Kyle Griffin, CSDG. Thank you, Ariella. I couldn't have said it any better myself. If you have any questions about this request for basically the removal of the 50 lots that are shown in Section 7 from the FFO, I'd be happy to answer any of them.
Okay. Does the board have any questions on this item for the applicant?
Maybe just one question of clarification on the map that you provided. The color in dark blue is the existing floodway overlay, and we're acknowledging the dark blue, or are we acknowledging the light blue on the map?
The dark blue is the floodway.
Okay.
The light blue is the floodway fringe, and those are our overlays. The floodway fringe coincides with the floodplain, and that is what has been analyzed by FEMA. So the light blue is changing.
Perfect. Okay, thank you for that. I'd like to present a motion if the chair would entertain a motion.
Yep, go
Do we
ahead.
need to close the motion to close the public hearing?
We have got, yep, let's back up. So we
Sure.
missed public comments. So are there any citizen comments? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to close the public
Motion to
comment?
close the public hearing.
Motion made, is there a second? Second by Jeff. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, public comments closed. All right, so back to, is there a motion on the item?
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Second.
A motion for approval made by Joel, second by Greg. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, item is approved. All right, item number 3. It's an appeal of an administrative decision regarding an interpretation of the floodway fringe overlay district boundaries based on a FEMA letter of map revision based on fill for the property located at 122 Harlansdale Court. Staff?
Thank you. The applicant is requesting an appeal of administrative decision to interpret the city's FFO boundaries for 122 Harlansdale Court in the Harlansdale Manor subdivision. The request is based on the letter of map revision based on fill document issued by FEMA on July 2nd, 2020. The zoning ordinance states that the FFO boundaries shall coincide with the boundaries of the 100-year floodplain, excluding floodways, as adopted in Section 17.6, floodway protection. This request is for the BZA to interpret the FFO boundary based on the FEMA-approved floodplain boundary change as identified in the LOMR, or the letter of map revision based on fill. Staff recommends a motion to approve the applicant's request to interpret the FFO boundary on the City of Franklin zoning map based on a letter of map revision based on fill issued by FEMA on July 2nd, 2020 for the property located at 122 Harlansdale Court. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you, staff. Is the applicant present for this item? If you could state your name for us, that would be great.
I'm Jason Dill. I'm with Collier Engineering, and we would definitely agree with staff and ask for your approval.
Okay. Questions from the board at all? I think that's what threw us off last time, Greg. I asked for questions before the public comment. So next, we'll open the public comment. Any citizen comments? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to close the public comment?
Motion to close.
Motion made by Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Joel. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, the public comment's closed. Ready to entertain a motion if you guys are ready.
Motion to approve based on letter of map revision based on fill issued by FEMA.
Okay, motion for approval made by Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by William. Any discussion or questions? All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, seeing none, item is approved. So next, item number 4, it's a variance request to allow parking within the Riverside Drive frontage area for a proposed principal building and a variance request to allow parking within the Oak Meadow Drive frontage area for a proposed building. So that's 2 variances there, and then the third one is a variance request to increase the maximum front yard setback from 30 feet to 150 feet for the property located at 880 Oak Meadow Drive. Staff?
Thank you. This 13.3 acre lot is located at 880 Oak Meadow Drive and is zoned RC6 Regional Commerce District. The owner wishes to develop the parcel with a 2-story, 100,000 square feet retail space. There is no site plan submitted for this project. The plans provided for this project represent the desired design of this site. This lot has some constraints to consider. The property has a border of slopes greater than 20% along Riverside Drive, some along Oak Meadow Drive, and along the access drive to Home Depot that runs along the property. There are also overhead power lines running along Riverside Drive within the public utility and drainage easement, which extends 40 feet into the property from the right-of-way. The applicant is requesting 3 variances. 1, to allow parking within the Riverside Drive frontage area. 2, to allow parking within the Oak Drive frontage area. And 3, to increase the maximum front yard setback from 30 feet to 150 feet. Now I will go into staff analysis. The BZA may authorize a variance only when the request has met all 3 criteria in accordance with the zoning ordinance. I'm going to start with the first request, and I'll read through the 3 criteria for this request, and then I'll just read staff analysis for the other requests. Please let me know if you'd like me to repeat any of the criteria at any point. Criteria 1, for request 1. Where by reason of exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of a specific piece of property at the time of the enactment of the zoning ordinance, or by reason of exceptional topographic conditions, or other extraordinary and exceptional situation or condition, such a piece of property is not able to accommodate development as required under this ordinance. There are some aspects of this property that qualify it as an exceptional situation, specifically steep slopes immediately adjacent to the right-of-way. However, it is not exceptional in a way that prevents the ability to accommodate development under the zoning ordinance for this specific request. In the absence of a site plan application, staff believes there are multiple ways that this site could be designed differently so that ADA parking could be placed to the side or behind the principal building and fire access can be provided in order to comply with the zoning ordinance. Staff finds this criteria is not met. Criteria 2. The strict application of any provision enacted under the zoning ordinance would result in peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties to, or exceptional or undue hardship upon the owner of the property. Staff finds that the strict application of the zoning ordinance would not result in particular and exceptional practical difficulties to, or exceptional or undue hardship upon the owner of the property. The variance request is unique to the applicant's proposed plan and not generally to all potential designs of the site, meaning that the applicant could design a plan for the site that meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance. It is the expectation of the city that an applicant designs their site in a way that meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance and not use the variance process to avoid inconvenience or financial hardship. Staff finds that the proposed plan introduces a self-imposed hardship, one that can be resolved by redesigning to meet the zoning ordinance. Staff finds this criteria is not met. Criteria 3. Such relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantially impairing the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance. The design of this site would not be a detriment to the public good, but it would impair the intent of the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance introduced the requirements for frontage starting with the 2019 zoning ordinance update as a direct response to the adoption of Envision Franklin in 2017. 2 of the core guiding principles are exceptional design and vibrant neighborhoods. One characteristic of exceptional design as outlined in Envision Franklin is that parking should be secondary to the building and its relationship to the street, and that views from the street should not be of parking lots. One characteristic of vibrant neighborhoods as outlined in Envision Franklin includes pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods that makes walking and biking more enjoyable along the streets. The intent of the zoning ordinance is to reinforce the principles of Envision Franklin by keeping parking to the side or behind principal buildings. This site is not designed in a way that meets the intent of the zoning ordinance. Staff finds this criteria is not met. Now I will go into staff analysis for request 2, which is to allow parking within the Oak Meadow Drive frontage area. Regarding criteria 1, as previously stated, there are steep slopes immediately adjacent to the right-of-way. However, it is not exceptional in a way that prevents the ability to accommodate development under the zoning ordinance for this specific request. For the same reason as criteria 1 for request 1, staff finds this criteria is not met. Regarding criteria 2 for request 2, staff finds that the strict application of the zoning ordinance would not result in peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties to, or exceptional or undue hardship upon the owner of the property. The variance request is unique to the applicant's proposed plan and not generally to all potential designs for the site. Staff finds that the proposed plan introduces a self-imposed hardship, one that can be resolved by redesigning to meet the zoning ordinance. Staff finds this criteria is not met. Regarding criteria 3 for request 2, the design of the site would not be a detriment to the public good, but it would impair the intent of the zoning ordinance. To align with the principles of Envision Franklin, parking should be secondary to the building and its relationship to the street, and views from the street should not be of parking lots. The intent of the zoning ordinance is to reinforce the principles of Envision Franklin by keeping parking to the side or behind principal buildings. This site is not designed in a way that meets the intent of the zoning ordinance. Staff finds this criteria is not met. Now I will go through staff analysis for request 3, which is to increase the maximum front yard setback from 30 feet to 150 feet. Regarding criteria 1 for request 3, the property has a border of slopes greater than 20% along Riverside Drive, some on Oak Meadow Drive, and the access drive to Home Depot that runs along the property. There are also overhead power lines running along Riverside Drive, which are within the public utility and drainage easement, which exceeds 40 feet into the property from the right-of-way. The maximum setback for landscape frontage is 30 feet. Given the topographic conditions and the depth of the easement, it would not be possible for the setback to be less than 40 feet. Staff finds this criteria is met. Regarding criteria 2 for request 3, staff finds that the strict application of a provision enacted under the zoning ordinance would result in exceptional practical difficulties for the owner of the property. Due to the slopes and the public utility and drainage easement, the front yard setback must be more than the required maximum of 30 feet. The property cannot comply with the strict application of the maximum setback required in this situation. The setback must be more than 40 feet, to accommodate the steep slope and easement along Riverside Drive. Staff finds this requirement is met. Regarding criteria 3 for request 3, the design of the site would not be a detriment to the public good, but it would impair the intent of the zoning ordinance. Two of the core guiding principles from Envision Franklin are exceptional design and vibrant neighborhoods, as stated before. Some of the characteristics of exceptional design, as outlined in Envision Franklin, are that buildings should activate the street by creating an inviting pedestrian experience, and views from the street should not be of parking lots. One characteristic of vibrant neighborhoods, as outlined in Envision Franklin, includes pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods that make walking and biking more enjoyable along streets. The intent of the zoning ordinance is to reinforce the principles of Envision Franklin by keeping buildings close to the street. While this site does require at least a 40 feet maximum setback, requesting a 150 feet setback seems unnecessary and far from the intent of the zoning ordinance. Staff finds this criteria is not met. There is one more thing to note in regards to this variance. Staff realized today that with the current wording, the request for a 150-foot setback would not only apply to the front yard setback along Riverside Drive, but also to the front yard setback along Oak Meadow Drive. While the applicant has not specifically requested that setback, it appears that the current design would also be reliant on a setback significantly over 30 feet along Oak Meadow Drive as well. Recommended motion. Staff recommends the Board of Zoning Appeals move to defer the variance request to allow parking within the Riverside Drive frontage area for a proposed principal building, and a variance request to allow parking within the Oak Meadow Drive frontage area for a proposed principal building, and a variance request to increase the maximum front yard setback from 30 feet to 150 feet for the property located at 880 Oak Meadow Drive, because the criteria for granting a variance were not supported by sufficient evidence. Without a proper site plan review, staff's professional opinion is that the site can be designed many ways. A proper site plan review with grading sheets and engineering and fire review could bring to light unique site conditions that may support the need for a variance. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you, staff. If I could ask two things, if you could repeat, I know there was a comment kind of about the setback. If you could repeat that for us one more time. I heard it, didn't quite register. If you can repeat that for us first, and then I have a second question also.
At the very end.
Yeah, kind of the section on the setback, I think it relates to maybe Oak Meadow Drive.
Yeah.
Okay.
We realized today that with the current wording, the request for a 150-foot setback would not only apply to the front yard setback along Riverside Drive, but also to the front yard setback along Oak Meadow Drive. While the applicant didn't specifically request that, it would also apply to Oak Meadow with the wording currently.
Okay. And if I can ask one other thing, I think it's pertinent to kind of what we're looking at the request. I'd ask staff if you could just give us a high-level overview. So I think we have Envision Franklin 2017, which was, I guess, adopted in 2017, that sets the guiding principles. So we've had a couple sites, probably within the past, I'll say 2, maybe 3 years, time flies. But if you could just give us an overview, because I think, if I think of this area, it's very different now from what the plan calls for. If you could just give us an overview of, I guess, the guidance from what the zoning is requiring, from just a high-level view of kind of what the city's vision is for this area.
Sure. I can jump into that. So you did a great segue. Thank you, Jonathan. Envision Franklin was our long-range plan. We've had a land use plan for many, many years for the city. Envision Franklin was the one we adopted in 2017. It went from a more general land use plan with very high-level concepts for our long-range goal to getting very specific about how we want sites laid out, what uses we want as primary uses on sites, what we want as secondary, what the character of that area should be, how things should be laid out. That was adopted, like I said, in 2017, and we immediately followed that up with a zoning ordinance update in 2019 to codify all those principles. So that's what you see in the zoning ordinance today, the goals of Envision Franklin and how to execute those. This area of the city is within the regional commerce design concept, which nicely coincides with the zoning district Regional Commerce 6. See what we did there? So all of the requirements of regional commerce really coincide with Envision Franklin. The goal is that this is a mixed-use environment, that we have activated streets, that these are employee centers where you can live, work, and play. And so the goal is that you have that mix of uses, buildings are pulled to the street, and buildings engage with the street so that pedestrians are moving back and forth, and we have that mix of uses throughout all of the sites. Also, that ground floor is really engaged. So things like the building types require a certain amount of glazing so that as you walk along the street, you are interacting with the buildings. So all of that is sort of what composes the zoning ordinance today. And so that's our vision. So yes, there are buildings today that don't comply, like the Home Depot, but that's because it was built 30 years ago. Right. If they wanted to redo the Home Depot, it'd be done in a much different way. We also have a site that was just approved across the street on the south side of Oak Meadow, and they did comply with all the zoning ordinance. They have a mix of uses in several buildings. Those buildings are pulled up to the street, and all their parking is behind or as parallel parking along the street. Does that do a good job?
That's great. Thanks, Steph.
You're welcome.
Is the applicant present? You could step forward for us and state your name. We don't have the screens. We all have, I think, digital access to the materials. So.
Sure. Hi, my name is Greg Gamble, and I'm representing the applicant and the landowner. And I actually went old school tonight, and I printed out maps on 8.5 by 11 that are a little bit easier to see. If you would like to have a little bit larger version, I'm happy to hand those out. If you feel comfortable with what you've got, then no problem. Would it be okay to bring these forward?
If you've got copies, that would be great.
Are these different than what we have in the
They're
digital?
exactly the same,
Okay.
they're just larger.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks.
Thank you. Hey, Amy, while he's doing that, is the nursing home that's adjacent to Home Depot, did that conform to the?
Summerby, it was approved under a previous zoning ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah, so they did not have to comply with this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank y'all for your time tonight. I really appreciate it. We believe that our request for this variance is justified, not just for the building that we're proposing, but based upon the site constraints that are on the property today. Yes, we have a cartoon site plan here that shows you an illustration of how the property could be developed. We weren't aware of the setback wording that needed to be applied to Oak Meadow Drive, and we can suggest a dimension for that if available tonight. We're patient. We're here to listen tonight. We have a very complicated situation that I'm going to lay out to you. Hopefully, we can find resolution tonight. I'm happy to do that. If there's additional information that you might need, we're also happy to bring back additional information. Riverside Drive, up until last year, was closed off. It was gated off. It was a road that ran parallel to I-65. It did not meet the City of Franklin's design standards. The property owners submitted a site plan, rebuilt Riverside Drive, and it's now constructed to new standards. There is a sidewalk that is on the western side of Riverside Drive that's now currently installed. If you turn to the second page in the handout that I gave you, you'll see slopes that have been outlined on the property along Riverside Drive. At the very bottom of the intersection where Oak Meadow Drive is and Riverside Drive, that is the stormwater basin that has been recently installed with the construction of Riverside Drive. So that is handling stormwater runoff in that location. The red area along Riverside Drive is an area of 3-to-1 slopes. Riverside Drive is lower than the site, so it kind of plateaus up. On the back side then, you have an access drive that goes to the back of Home Depot. Summerby is just to the west of that. That red area is also 3-to-1 slopes. It is difficult at best for the fire department to service emergency services to this property from either Riverside Drive or from the access drive, the existing access drive, due to those slopes and due to the change of grades. If you look on the next page, then we're showing you the right-of-way line of Riverside Drive, the center line of the power line poles, and the electric line that runs between the right-of-way drive and the easement, and then the red line there is the easement line. These power line poles handle significant infrastructure for Middle Tennessee Electric. They are not allowing us to put these underground. They want them above ground so that they can be easily serviced. They are major transmission lines that handle electric power to significant areas of Franklin. As a result of that, there are OSHA-required safety zones that are required on either side of those power line poles. Not just for construction, but you can imagine during construction there are boom trucks, there's equipment deliveries, there are scaffolding on the side of the buildings, but also for the fire truck when the truck has to come and raise the ladder. They can't be within a certain distance. We have to have enough space in between the building and the electric poles that we're not creating a hazard and not creating something that would be unsafe. This building does front onto Riverside Drive. On the next page in the illustrative packet, you will see where we have drawn the Riverside Drive building frontage lines. Those are the red dashed lines there. The way in which the zoning ordinance reads, we're not allowed to park in that area between the red dash lines and the right-of-way of Riverside Drive, or the red dash lines and the right-of-way of Oak Meadow Drive. However, we do have to have fire circulation in that area around the building in order to adequately serve and meet the safety needs for the fire department. You can see, regardless of what building we put on this property, whether it is a 2-story, 100,000 square foot building or not, we're very limited on this site because of the slopes, because of the power line poles on where parking could be located and how this property could be developed. That is a significant restriction.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
for
sure can.
Clarification. So to make sure I'm hearing you correctly, the red lines.
The
are
red
as-
dash
yep,
line.
Those are as close as you can be with a building structure to the,
That's as close as parking would be.
no. So in order for a fire truck to safely access the building, have you demarcated that?
You know,
at all?
it could be a few more feet closer
Okay.
to the right-of-way line. I mean, it could be 5 or 10 feet closer.
Is there a defined?
We
number
want
there?
a safe pedestrian zone out here in front of the buildings, and so we're providing probably a little bit more gracious area there for, but again, this is conceptual.
Sure.
Staff had recommended that we provide an entire site plan. That is a couple $100,000 investment that my client is a little concerned about making, not knowing exactly how we could position this building on the property, given the power lines and the slopes and the access.
And
So we're
Mr.
kind of
Gam- I
caught
think
between
my
a rock and a
question
hard
is,
place.
Could you draw the line for the fire truck? Because it sounds like the argument you're presenting
Mm-hmm.
is that fire services could apply their skill
Sure.
onto the site is the biggest barrier that we're working on, given where the power lines are on the Riverside Drive side.
It's one of the barriers.
Yeah,
So
Absolutely
you
is.
could create a loop around the building, but they don't want you to have any parking,
Correct.
is what we're getting at, right?
And so a limiting factor there is that if we remove all of this parking that is here alongside or in front of the building, it significantly impacts the developability of the property. Yeah.
sure. I guess what I'm trying to get comfortable with is if fire access is a big challenge, one of the big
Sure.
challenges, where is that line? Like, where does how far back do you actually have to be in order for a fire apparatus to execute?
This is a guess.
Yeah,
It's probably an educated guess, but I would say that if the power line easement itself is 40 feet from the right-of-way, we're probably looking at another 40 feet, so probably 80 total.
okay, so theoretically, if we have 150 currently,
Mm-hmm.
we would only need half of that? Half and then some?
Half and then some is what we're requesting, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your
Yeah,
clarity
no, I-
there. I think that access for our fire apparatus is of utmost importance.
Yeah, I do too. And one of the things I want to point out, if you go 2 pages in, this area here shows you if the building is located at the existing grade.
Mr. Gamble?
Yes.
Can you use the exhibit number at the bottom, or letter at the bottom?
I sure can, yeah, G.
Okay.
Gee,
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Skill.
it's,
That's right, G. If you locate the building at the existing grade of 706, which is at that plateau, and you look at the existing grade of Riverside Drive at 702, we would need to have 10% slope on the entrance drive coming in. The maximum slope on the parking lot is 5%. The maximum slope on the parking spaces is 2%, and we have a 1% pedestrian area. That 150 feet takes into consideration the maximum slopes that are required by City of Franklin Engineering when designing a site from Riverside Drive to the building at the existing grade. In other words, to pull the building closer to meet those fire department, or just engineering standards, we would have to lower the site significantly.
And why can't that be done?
Why can't, taking the site from 706 to 703,
Why can't-
it's just, that would be a massive undertaking to lower that much of the site in order to accommodate the, it's not impossible, but lowering Roper's Knob also would, I mean, you're talking about a significant grade change in earthwork in order to make that,
Probably wouldn't be financially feasible.
That's what I'm wondering. Okay, okay.
and I know we can't argue financial feasibility at the Board of Zoning Appeals, and I'm trying to avoid that, but it would be a massive undertaking.
That's what I was curious about.
Sorry, thank you. It's our opinion, our belief, that regardless of what building is proposed on the site, what building is proposed on the property, these issues, these constraints on this particular property cannot be avoided. The zoning ordinance requirements for regional commerce do require that parking in front of or on the side of the building be parallel parking. We understand that. This is a little bit different situation as we're trying to address the complexity of this property, not only with the grade changes, the changes in the slopes, but also the power line poles. Again, Happy to address any additional information. If you have questions that we need to come back with, we're happy to do that. This is something that we certainly have time to discuss with the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Thank you. We'll have more questions, I'm sure, but
No
you
problem.
can take a break and take a seat for a couple of minutes, catch your breath. All right, so next we'll open the public comment. Any citizen comments? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to close the public comment?
Motion to close.
Motion made by Jeff, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Joel, I think, is that correct?
Yes.
Yep. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, seeing none, then the public comment's closed. With 5 here tonight, like I'm looking at mouths trying to move, and everybody sounds the same, so.
Used to that.
This maybe is just a point of clarification from staff. Parcel 101.19 is the entire piece, and the improvements are just being proposed on the front half, if you
Correct.
will, of that property.
Correct.
I'm going to ask a question, going back to the, kind of the last comment that I asked you to repeat. How does that impact, because we're looking at 3 variance requests here, how would that impact what we're looking at? And we also may have to ask the applicant, kind of that piece, but I'm still not real clear on how that impacts the variance requests. I know we're looking at the Oak Meadow Drive.
So the
Could you just-
language that we put in the title is that the front setback be extended to 150 feet. This site actually has 2 front setbacks because of both Oak Meadow and Riverside Drive. The applicant addressed in their letter Riverside Drive. They did not address the constraints of Oak Meadow. Staff overlooked that, but it would apply, so we can discuss it, we can defer it if we need more information, but I wanted to bring to your attention that the language would, if you approve it, apply to both setbacks.
Okay, perfect. Now I'm fully clear. Thank you very much. Sometimes I'm slow, you know. It takes about 3 times. All right, so I'll say, are there any factual kind of questions? I don't want to get into a back and forth really of kind of debating the item, but if there's questions to kind of help you understand the item, we have quite a bit going on the site. Are there other questions from the board? Either of staff or the applicant, I think we could work with either of those now.
Maybe one question that I have beyond, thank you, Mr. Campbell, for your response to my question around the fire service access. And that addresses the front yard of Riverside. But with regard to the front yard of Oak Meadow, because if we approve all of this, it will come back because of Oak Meadow unless we address it. So are there similar constraints on Oak Meadow that prevent the building from being closer?
Stormwater management, that is the lowest point of the site where the stormwater will go before it exits out into the regional system. That stormwater area, in discussions with our civil engineer, would be best suited in an open space lot that would be shared by our plan and then future as well. I know that in conversations with staff earlier, it doesn't have to be in an open space lot if it's a unified site plan. Wasn't aware that we needed to also request a setback for the building in that location. The total distance there is approximately 80 feet to the closest point of the building, so it does exceed the regional commerce front setback of 0 to 30. We have to reserve that area for stormwater infrastructure. It's the only place on the property that it can go, so. We will have bioretention, water quality distributed throughout. We're required to have that distributed for every 2 acres. But as far as detention, that's where it needs to go.
Okay.
So what's the distance? I see the narrow section kind of along that, I call it west, I don't know if it's true west or not, kind of right side of or left side of the diagram. Moving south, like what is that setback distance, just estimating? I mean, it looks like.
Sure, from the building to Oak Meadow Drive, it's somewhere between 80 and 90 feet, and I don't have an exact number for you at its closest point.
And even down to, because you've got 2 stormwater areas, kind of that point where you intersect with Oak Meadow and Riverside, that far edge point, I mean, that's over 80, right?
It's well over 80. We're probably, the Parking area in that location is about 45 feet, so I would say we're upwards of over 150 in that location there to the corner point.
Gotcha. So just clarifying with staff then, so that building setback, let's say I'm at the corner measuring kind of setback from, at the intersection of Oak Meadow, Riverside, that building, if an applicant asks for a variance on the setback, 80 or 90 wouldn't do it because it's going to apply to that whole side of Oak Meadow Drive, correct?
Yes, that setback line becomes parallel to the curve of Oak Meadow
Yep.
and the curve of Riverside.
How would that need to be addressed?
For setback purposes,
Correct.
I think in this instance, just off the top of my head, we would need to see where that maximum distance, hold it up, that maximum distance is, what that largest amount is, and ask for a maximum of. You guys have done in the past not to exceed a number so that it can be a variation up to a maximum point.
Okay, any other questions? There's a lot to digest, I think.
Yeah, Greg, what are the contours doing as you go back towards the open parcel? Does it continue to rise? I'm trying to remember.
It does continue to rise. There's a tree line here that's at the highest point of the property
Okay.
in elevation, and it slopes down toward Riverside Drive, but the entirety of Riverside Drive sits lower than the entirety of the property.
Right.
There is an exhibit, so Exhibit F, I drove out to the site and looked at it because I was curious. I'm always through the Home Depot area, but I'm never behind that section. But Exhibit F, that top picture does kind of show terrain changes, if that helps you visually anyway.
Yeah, that's the storm area up front, right?
Yeah,
That's
that
the
should
front
be
corner.
that way.
I was just asking, because if you were to lower that side, you'd have to lower it all the way back.
Right.
And then the next parcel where that building is, well, that's obviously an existing parking lot.
I would say for the front setback on Oak Meadow Drive, if we were at a range between 80 and 200 feet, we would be within that limitation on Oak Meadow Drive.
Just kind of confirm that, so maximum point, just guesstimate 220.
It's pretty well educated based upon the parking lot dimensions and a 60-foot parking bay. I believe I'm pretty close.
Any other questions at all?
And again, if you feel more comfortable with me bringing back specific dimensions to you, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I think, in the past, when we've tried to take all of the motions at once, it doesn't make sense. They're interrelated, but I think I'd say take them one by one. And I'm ready to entertain a motion, even if it's really for discussion. I have some thoughts definitely on the property, but I think if we're deliberating, we'll want a motion and then have that after that initial motion.
I'd like to make a motion to defer. However, I also want to acknowledge Mr. Gamble and what you're trying to get out of this meeting so that you don't walk away with just, well, we deferred it. Are there
Thank you.
particular questions maybe that you would raise that we can provide some direct guidance on? Obviously, the setback is one question. I don't have a feeling tonight like that I could be in support of approving that setback variance in both areas without some better understanding and maybe some more hard facts.
Okay.
And so rather than present a non-approval recommendation, I think I'd rather present deferral, but I would also want to make sure that the questions that are open on your side are at least voiced so that we can provide you better clarity and you can come back with a plan that we can have, I think, a little bit more meat to make decisions on.
Okay.
if that's okay with you, Mr. Chair.
What if you withdraw your motion, and then I would say we can just go back to the applicant, and, you know, in some ways, kind of maybe address, I don't know, time frame and guidance is kind of what I'm thinking.
I think if I may, given the opportunity, would like to request a deferral, and then if a motion is made, that it could be discussed.
So let's go ahead. So you made.
Somebody has
so
to second it
motion
first,
for
and then
deferral.
second.
Yep. So motion for deferral, second by Jeff.
Can I clarify, is it a motion to defer all 3 items or just one
Yeah.
variance? Okay.
A motion
thank
to
you.
defer, I'd have to find the number, but yes,
Okay.
the entire program, yeah.
And then we'll want to do
Thank
date
you,
certain,
Brad.
so motion for deferral to the January, is it going to be the 5th, 2023 meeting? Just to confirm that.
Are you okay with that? Will you have enough time to get that, or you need?
We're fine.
Okay.
No problem. We all, I think, had some questions as to what your responses might be to some of this. It's a little out of the box, a little unusual. But I do believe that the variance request is based upon the hardships driven by the property. So happy to bring back additional information for you. Yes.
I want to say one thing real quick. So obviously you guys have put a lot of time and thought already into the master planning. So if once this gets approved, I mean, you're going to move forward with the site plan based on this master plan design? Is that correct?
We'd like to, yes.
I mean, you're not going to change the scheme really. I mean, this is what you would proceed with. And you feel like that will comply with everything else as you go through?
I believe so. We
Typical
obviously,
site
we're
plan.
going to have to react to some engineering and other.
But for the most part.
For the
I
most
mean,
part.
You've put that kind of effort in already.
We have.
And looking through the rules. Okay, I just wanted to be clear about that.
All right, so we've got a motion by Greg, second by Jeff. I think that's correct, am I right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so discussion.
And Joel, maybe I'd ask you a question. You asked
Deferral
it.
to, so.
Deferral the entire
to-
program to the January 5th meeting, 2023.
Yep, so deferral to the January 5th meeting, so you second that, Jeff?
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay, so second by Jeff, so we're deferring it to the January 5th, 2023 meeting.
And then discussion on this motion.
Yep.
So Joel, you asked a pretty direct question there. Can you explain maybe what was behind that?
Yeah, just that, I mean, this site, it only has, they've tried to figure out like what the highest and best use is, and this is a pretty good plan for that. You know what I mean? And obviously these guys know what it takes in Franklin to do this right. So I'm just wanting everybody to be thinking that their whole idea is, once this hopefully gets approved as soon as possible, that they're pretty sure that's everything's gonna comply. They're gonna move forward with, the construction documents, the permitting application process, which still has to, get approved, which is the $200,000 in the time. But, they want to feel pretty good about that going in. They have to have this part. There's only so much you can do. If they could do it within the realm of what the rules are, they would already done that, so. I just wanted everybody to be clear about what they have already put in. This is not just a toy plan, this is thoughtful. This is the process of how you get there, that's all.
Can I make a statement from staff's perspective? Thank you very much, Joel. And Gamble Design does a very good job. They know our ordinance very well, but I would like to clarify, this plan has not been seen by city staff. It has not been reviewed by any engineering
Right.
staff member, any fire staff member. So while this might meet all the parameters of the zoning ordinance, it might not. And I just want to clarify that. Staff
Yep.
has not looked at this plan.
So I guess from a staff perspective, because I think there's a challenge, you kind of have applicant, I think city staff would say, well, let's design the whole site. We need something to review, which is accurate. I guess, is there a way based on, I'll call it conceptuals of at least staff comment where every department seeing, fire is seeing what is coming before the Board of Zoning Appeals potentially next month? I think my concern is
If you have a question, if you want to ask a specific question, we could certainly try to get that answered by a member of staff. But I guess I would need your question.
It sounds like, Jonathan, there's a little bit of a chicken or egg scenario here.
Well, and that's
where-
kind of what I was saying too, is
Yeah.
like what she said is that even if we approve this whole thing could get kiboshed after this, because because of those details that she's talking about. This is just the first shot.
Yeah, they've
at
obviously
possibility of
declared there
actually
wasn't enough
building,
information.
you know, on
If
the
I,
site.
if I may, Mr. Chair, this might help give you a little bit more framework. The motion that's before you right now is whether or not to defer to next month. There's really not a great opportunity for inquiry or discussion about what a future plan might look like. There's not a great opportunity for staff to give you much in the way of comment, since staff has indicated they've not seen a plan. Really, the discussion you're having right now is the merits of whether or not to defer to next month and why you should or shouldn't do that. And also the applicant, as I heard, but it was a little confusing, also seemed to request deferral. So maybe that will help kind of push you in the direction of discussion you need to be having. It's the question before you right now is, should you defer to next month and why?
Unless somebody wants to approve it. And
Well,
make
the
a
motion
to
now
approve
is to
it.
defer.
Okay.
Yeah, right now we have to decide if that is good, because, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's, yeah, I agree. I think my challenge is I just don't want to have us sitting here January 5th with the same discussion, like, to figure out how to move forward without, I think that's my challenge and probably the board's challenge. So totally understand deferral, like, from procedure standpoint. So we've got a motion for deferral. You've got a second.
And I think, Jonathan, on that motion, I think my concerns are twofold, and I think we've addressed one of the concerns around a deferral motion. One is, does staff feel like that's enough time for them to go back and get more information? And then the other side that kind of, in my mind, as you said, Mr. Squires, is interesting, the applicant almost has asked for deferral. And those are the things that fueled kind of my recommendation. The other thing that I would leave up is, I hate for somebody to come into this board, need to receive information in order to move forward, and for us to leave them with nothing, other than come back next month and ask the same or similar, maybe even different questions. And that's maybe in my mind the reason I would say maybe deferral's not the right option. Because as you said, Joel, this isn't just something they threw on a piece of paper. There was intent and time and energy invested in this. I guess the question for me is, by deferring it, we don't close the door on some of the requests, but I don't want to tell them to come back in a month without giving them the information that they need. And so the only question in my mind on whether we should defer or not is, should we defer for 1 month or more?
So I think my thought is, and maybe it's a yes or no from staff on this, is in our discussion, we can provide feedback on our thoughts on the site that could assist the applicant for whatever might come forward. Would that be accurate?
Yes and no. So in this situation, city staff has not seen a plan. So your role is to look at a variance from what city staff has approved, denied, those sorts of things that can't be otherwise approved. So you can give feedback, certainly in your thoughts, but until city staff issues recommendations, reviews, plans, all the departments weigh in and all of that, you don't know what might be before you again in January. You don't know what part of the zoning ordinance might be met or not met. You don't know what other codes issues could come up. All of those issues will play into what could be in front of you in January. So it's difficult, if not borderline impossible, for you to make commentary to an applicant right now that will lead them to an approvable plan, if that makes sense, or
it
to even
does.
define what might be before you next month.
With one exception, Mr. Squires, if I'm understanding it correctly, if we fail the deferral and choose to approve what's been put in front of us today.
If you approve it, then the variance is granted. It's a yes/no situation.
So we're still in discussion. I think I'll mention, so I support deferral. I have seen the site. There are steep slopes on the site. I think this area is unique. Staff presented feedback, background into Envision 2017, the plan that was adopted, the zoning ordinance standards. We're adjacent to I-65. That's kind of what I keep going back to. It's definitely a unique context. That's my comments. Any other discussion? Okay.
I think my struggle at this point is in ignorance about certain aspects. And I think what Greg's trying to get at would also help me because if we can provide some kind of guidance, then we know what they can bring back to inform us. But it sounds like for Mr. Squire, we're kind of limited in what we can request at this point.
I mean, you can certainly deliberate, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I mean to be that guy, the Grinch at Christmas time. Having said that, though, you leave the applicant in a little bit of an awkward position because there's not a plan that's been reviewed by city staff. Does that make sense? You're sort of spitting into the dark or shooting into the dark about what that might look like, what parts of the zoning ordinance might later need a variance, all of those things. At this point, we really don't know. That's some of what I heard staff saying, and I believe that's why they're recommending deferral. So I say that just to help put a little sheen over what your discussion is, to the extent that they can't really give you great direction. You're faced with the same dilemma with any kind of feedback you might give. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it.
Can I ask staff a question?
Sure, absolutely.
And this again goes to your point, Greg, I'm curious. How much time would you all need to maybe allow the applicant to gather information or get questions that help push this farther along to something we can actually fruitfully discuss and not kind of shoot in the dark?
Certainly the easiest way for staff to review a plan for this site was for if they were to submit a pre-application for the site plan. I know that's a lot of information for the applicant to provide, but it also provides us with a baseline to look at it realistically. So things like a grading plan to show us how that grade has to meet a certain 10% and it has to go up to a certain point. So then we start to understand why it can't just be a road right at that 40-foot line where the easement ends. The next pre-application deadline I would have to look is not, we just passed that deadline. So it would be late December to submit for pre-application, early January, but I believe that would not give enough time for us to have that information for the January BZA meeting, so perhaps February. Might be my first sort of thought process of how to get more staff to look at something to give you a more well-rounded answers to some of these questions.
Let's
Yeah,
just
and-
defer it and not time weight it.
So here's
That
also
way,
my.
He has plenty of time to get whatever he needs to staff for them to review. They've said in the memo that there's not enough information for a decision to be made. So I think we need to give him that opportunity to give the staff whatever they need for them to make a decision. He doesn't want to pay for a set of civil drawings.
Yeah, I get it.
So what he's trying to do is try to get as much information as he can before he commits. And that's why he's here.
And I get that. I'm just curious about the appropriate deferral
Yeah,
time. I think that was.
Yeah,
kind of
especially with
concern.
Christmas and December, and, I mean, we've got a lot of things happening. I think we just defer it and not time weight it and give Greg the opportunity to get to the staff whatever he needs to get to him, and we can go from there.
I want to hear your comments. Yeah.
I like the idea of putting a time on it so that it shows up. We can always defer it again in January.
Right.
And hopefully, Mr. Gamble won't have to come back in if we decide that we want a deferral and you're not here. We could do that kind of administratively. My fear is if we don't put a time, then staff doesn't have a goal and Mr. Gamble doesn't have a goal to hit. That's my first thought. My second thought is around Mr. Gamble and this site, and this is, I'm going to try my best to make it relevant to the motion that's in front of us right now.
Please do, or the gavel may come out from
Yeah,
the over there.
I'll duck over here on your guidance. The number one challenge I see is the shape of Oak Meadow Drive, the Riverside Drive side, and as those two things come together, that's one issue, but to compound that further, you've got main power lines that are on that site that you need space from, and now you've got two front yards,
And you have fire apparatus.
and you have fire apparatus, and you have significant slope. And so the likelihood that, given those limitations, Mr. Gamble can go away and in 4 weeks overcome those barriers seems a bit challenging, but I'd like to give them the opportunity to carry on that conversation. I understand the significance of a cost, like just doing an entire site plan, if you don't know where the lines are. And so I want us to maybe spend a little bit more time, come back later in 2023 and review it again with very clear, like, this is what we'd like to do, and these are the specific requests that we have. Because right now, I don't feel like, without deferral, I don't think that I'm in a position where I could vote in support of granting a variance to the plan that's before me. And so, without more information. So for that reason, I think deferral is the right move.
May I offer an amendment to his motion? Is that something we can,
Yeah.
You certainly can.
so as I understand it, your deferral is to January 5?
Yep.
Can I amend it to February, whatever that is? And that should give, hopefully, more time to
February 2nd.
February 2nd, get some information. Would you like, is that an acceptable
I don't know,
amendment?
can you amend my January 5th to February?
Yes, it requires a second, and then you have to vote on the amendment, and then go back and vote on the main.
I'll second that.
Okay.
You all right with that, Greg?
It'd be our preference if we did 1 month at a time.
Okay.
We've not had a chance to discuss with the staff. If I can get a meeting with fire, a meeting with engineering, a meeting with planning, it may not be at a pre-app process, but we're not submitting a site plan. We are trying to gather more information and more facts from the departments,
Well, if
and
we
if I
give you
can,
February 2nd, you can still come in early.
and if I need to defer from January 5th, we can do so at that time.
Yep, so I think if,
So you
right
want-
now, I think we've got a motion still for January. We haven't
January 5th.
changed that. I'm in support of that, I guess, because.
Nobody seconded your amendment.
You second?
I actually did.
He
but
seconded,
Since
so-
he came up, we can,
So y'all can vote to, let's vote to deny my amendment.
Well,
And then-
okay, hold on.
Sorry.
So there's an underlying rule that when you make a motion, you're not allowed to argue against it, right? The idea is that if you're putting it out there, you support it or you wouldn't have said it.
right.
Okay.
So if you want to withdraw your motion to amend,
Yes.
you can do that as long as the person who seconded it is all right with that.
May I withdraw my amendment?
Absolutely.
Because you hadn't really had much deliberation about it or gone anywhere with
Right.
it.
Okay.
So you're back to your main motion to defer to January.
January 5th.
All right, so, and I'll mention, I think that's the smart move. I think we're still in discussion now, kind of based on where we're at. But I think that makes sense. We can see what happens by January 5th. And I think my comments also to staff, it's less of design the site, tell me whether it meets every checkbox on the zoning ordinance. It's more, and this may be on the applicant, to go to each department, provide us with feedback, just so that we kind of know that, and also the dimensions on the Oak Meadow Drive side. I think it gives time for that, just with deferral. Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor of deferral to the January 5th, 2023 meeting?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, seeing none, this item is deferred till January 5th, 2023. See you next month.
Thanks, absolutely, thanks. Won't be here next time.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's a motion for adjournment made by Jeff, second by Joel. Is that right?
Yep.
Second by Joel. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none. You guys have a good night.